Brian, in 21st century, do you think we still should talk about the issues such as human rights and gender inequality, women leadership, or do you think they have been resolved? So this is going to be the talk of today. I'm Nasim Salehi, Professor of Healthcare Innovations, and
I'm Brian Dolan, Director of Health Service 360 in the UK, but also a nurse, an author of books around leadership and emergency nursing and other things.
Brian, we've done some studies around women health and well-being and also some studies about women leadership. And both of them, they are in healthcare settings because of course we are both from healthcare.
Yes.
And these studies, they showed some sort of system level ecological approach or ecological system level approach around, for example, women leadership, if you want to maybe take the focus there.
Yep.
So in order to enhance the woman leadership, we need to look at the individual factors, organizational factors, and societal factors. So when we talk, maybe we can provide some examples from each and interconnect them, because this talk can go for hours, but of course we want to make it a bit shorter if we can by interconnecting those three levels. In order to start, I just wanted to highlight that based on World Health Organization statistics, which is a global statistics, it's suggesting that majority of the healthcare workforce are women, more than 70%, but only 20% they are in high leadership positions.
Yeah.
But this is integrated and globally. So Brian, what are the main issues? We can start maybe macro level policy making and then slowly coming to the organizational level and then individual level.
Sure, and I guess, a first thought that people might think, white male talking about women in leadership, but it's about, I think, allyship, championing, and being a big inclusive tent to make sure everyone has an opportunity to contribute constructively and supportively in this space.
Can I just add something?
Yes, please
here?
do.
So Brian, that's a great point, because I just wanted to highlight that in our study, actually, which was about empowering women leaders, we invited male leaders to provide us suggestions that how we can empower women leaders in healthcare together.
Yeah.
And then having you as one of those successful male leaders also is a great opportunity to learn and to empower us. Thank you.
Sure, and bear in mind, like most of my life, I can only think of 2 or 3 men who were my leaders, my managers, I should say. We should separate those two elements out. It is a big overlapping Venn diagram, management and leadership. It's not a separated thing, but most of the people I work for, including right now, have been largely absolutely amazing women, truly. But at a macro level, I think we need to disaggregate the macro into recognizing that culture, context, geography makes a big difference. So in terms of the perceptions, we know in the NHS, for example, 70% of the workforce are women. When it comes to executive boards, it's much higher percentage than 20%. Of chief executives are women and executive directors are women. So it is I'm not quite sure exactly what the number is off the top of my head, but it is much more diverse in that respect. Whereas in other countries, and let's use the extreme example of Afghanistan, women are literally being banned from the public, and to an extent even their private spaces are being dismantled significantly. So there is a lot of variability. The net effect is just over 50% of the population is women, and it should be just over 50% of the leadership. But leadership isn't just about job title. It isn't just about being the CEO or the executive director or the C-suite. It's not about those things. Leadership can be found in many places and spaces. So leadership is more than just it's not a job title. Leadership is really about a set of behaviors. So how can we support, amplify, and also the thing is giving people a choice, not railroading people into roles just because, that's what we're supposed to do, whether of any gender, but also enabling those who do want to do so. How do we make it easier, a smoother journey, and a more supportive one, and one that doesn't have penalties? And one of the biggest penalties women face is the Parenthood Penalty. whether they have children or not.
Yeah.
No man ever gets asked the question, so how are you going to manage the domestics if you get this really senior job? Nobody says that question to men. But even if it isn't articulated, you know too often it's in there, you know.
Totally. Brian, while we are in the macro level section in terms of policy making, you know, in some specific countries, such as Scandinavian countries, in some specific organizations, such as, for example, private organizations, they consider some specific, support for women, for example, days off for period or hormonal changes. And providing support for fathers in order to take care of children and having days off. What do you think about those policies to provide a bit more support and balanced approach? For example, you know, period is a good example. When we take sick day for hormonal changes, we may feel guilty that I should have been at work, and then you may don't feel relaxed about it. But if we have it in policy and practice, then you know that there are some days that you can take off. And of course, we don't want to medicalize these things, hormonal changes, but the point is that providing the support that women, they feel comfortable that they know that there are some support there if they want to take days off
for that
specific thing.
For sure. I love this. There was a lovely thing that was done in the States, and what they did is they put a pad onto men, young college grads, and they put it onto them, and then they'd crank up the pain. It was all electric stimulation. These young men were poleaxed, and this is when they got to 4, and some of the women said, but I deal with an 8 every month, and I was reflecting on this thing about, there was a girlfriend I had, and she would be absolutely poleaxed with dysmenorrhea every month. She really, really had a rough time, but it never dawned on her that she couldn't go to work, or she didn't have to go to work. She was really anxious about having a poor sickness record. And I look back, on those days, her productivity would, by definition, because she was in so much discomfort, she couldn't, she was studying accounting, she could not have had her game her head in the game. So a supportive employer would look at people like that and say, right, how do I help them to be their best person? And of course, we can't speak in universals, we shouldn't. But we should be looking at, are there some who need this additional support over others for any condition, not just this, but 100% behind that kind of stuff. And here's a funny old thing. I had somebody who worked for me, and she asked, could she increase her hours? This is when I worked in a public sector in a job. And I said, yes, I've thought about this, and I'll find what we can in the budget. She only wanted an extra 4 hours, like half day a week, and stuff like that. I said, but here's the thing, I don't want you at work any more physically than you do, because I do know what you sometimes do is you do the papers in the night when I know your kids have gone to bed, and I think what we really need to be doing is a conversation about recognising that. And that felt like a very fair, so if anytime, by the way, anyone applied for a job for me in my executive career, if I saw that they were a parent with young children, to my mind, that was a great big tick in their favour, which is counter to what you often see. My view was, these are people who've got no time to faff about, they've got to sort out getting the kids. I would say to the team, I never want to hear that you didn't go to a child's Christmas concert, whatever it may be. I never want to hear that because you couldn't get hold of me. Assume I said yes. I'll be disappointed if you didn't know where I was and you thought, I can't go. That is how we make the workplace more human. And by the way, this would apply to the dads as well. There's they do key cutting, and they do dry cleaning, they do all sorts. And there's a company called Timpson's, and they're quite famous for this. So they employ about 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 of their staff, 1 in maybe 7, are former prisoners. They give people a chance. If you're unemployed and you're going for a job interview, they'll dry clean your suit for free. But at the start of the school terms, at the beginning especially of the year, they will put a little notice at the shop that we will have fewer staff this morning because, and it's usually dads, they're going to be taking their child to school for the first. We hope you understand. People love working there. Their turnover is really low. For birthdays, they encourage their staff members to take the day off at no extra. This isn't taken out of your holiday. This is an extra. So it's all. That is what a great employer looks like. When I've been getting keys cut over the years, now say, "How do you like this place?" Love it. I love it. We just feel They are literally given permission to give like a key ring holder to a customer. The boss says, "You work it out." So they've got very low theft. They've got high engagement. They've got a staff who are loyal, selling. That is what great employers do, because the business reward from being a good employer is much greater than the cost of doing the right thing.
Totally. And of course, I think it's all about looking at the context and how we can provide equitable care, equitable support and services for based on different social demographic factors. For example, now we are talking about females, and it is relevant to males as well.
Yeah.
Like we gave the example of hormonal changes for women based on their context, but maybe we can say psychosocial health support for males, that for example they may don't talk about their psychosocial issues or mental health issues. So considering that equitable approach and enhancing the capacity of individuals based on their context is a really big thing. And currently, because we are focusing on women health and well-being and their leadership, so we are talking about the capacity of women and how we can help them. But then at the same time, we don't mean that we should discriminate against male.
No, I hope it's not been heard. Well, there's a good example a couple of good examples. So at macro level, in New Zealand, there's a thing called whānau ora, and that is a policy of you lift the health and well-being of Maori community, you lift the health and well-being of the whole community. In healthcare, if we get it right for older people and really put the energy into making older people's services right, we will get it right for everybody else as well. So it's that rising tide that lifts all of the boats. So for those who say, "Oh, this is all a bit woke and it's all a bit discriminatory, what about that?" It's a bit like Black Lives Matter. People say, "Oh, but all lives matter." Look, if my house is on fire, I don't need the fire crew to turn up and put a hose on every single house. It's only my house that's on fire. But it could spread to other houses, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't put the fire crew focused on the place that's on fire. That is not wokery. That is about doing the right thing because it makes sense. If no other reason, it's because it makes sense.
Totally. And sometimes it's not about equal opportunities. It may be about equitable chances and opportunities. And this is not discrimination. So for example, if women, they need more support about a specific thing and male may need support for another specific thing, but not equal, that could be totally okay, and it's not discrimination.
That's right.
It's about focusing on their specific needs based on their context.
Yes. And actually picking up that point, something we teach in our leadership class, Professor Dolan, she'd identify this, and it's called the fourth box. And what you have is 3 cartoon drawings, and the first one is you got a dad and 2 boys, one a little boy, one's a little older boy. And equality can be defined as you give, and there's a fence, and they're looking at a baseball game or a field game. And equality is they all get the same size box, but the little one still can't see over the fence. Equity is the dad doesn't need a box, he's tall enough. The middle one needs 1 box to help him see over, and the third one, the little one, needs 2 boxes. That is equity. The third box is liberation, is you take the fence down. And then what we get people to do is, how would you build the 4th box? What would the 4th box look like? And that takes people some really hard thinking, differentiation of equity, equality, liberation. What would be the next phase?
Brian, let's talk a bit about organizational level. But of course, I think because these 3 levels, individual, organizational, and societal level, they are interconnected. We may go back again to different levels. We have so many training programs and so many mentorship programs around empowering leadership and in this case, empowering women leaders as well. But I mean, sometimes it feels like ticking the boxes,
Yeah.
because personalization is a big thing, and of course it takes time. However, in long term it's very sustainable.
Yeah.
So if we can provide nurturing, personalized mentorship to, for example, women who wants to become leaders in future,
Yeah.
I mean, that could be very sustainable approach, because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
personalize it, we provide a nurturing approach. In terms of training as well, sometimes you just put some training about leadership there without making it practical, making it aligned with their context of work.
Yeah.
And then we learn something, but we don't know exactly how to make sense of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is your suggestion about redesigning those empowering training approaches for women, for leadership,
Sure,
and
sure.
also mentorship?
So there's a couple of things. One is, I think too often training is, I think of it as a sheep dip approach. You dip everyone in the thing, and they run off and they dry out, and it had no real impact. You might have a fewer fleas, but that's kind of it. It doesn't really make a world of difference. But more modern, as I see it, the way we provide our leadership development is, first, it's holding space. I came across a line the other day. It was on the cover of a magazine. It was about DEI, and it says, we constantly ask women to raise their voices, but maybe we need to make the room quieter. And I really quite like that. And I think the way we do that is we enable voices to be heard by making the room quieter, by holding space for them. So last week I was teaching at King's College Hospital in London for a group of, they call them matrons there, assistant directors of nursing. And a number of them, I think it was about 17 or something like that, and that particularly got to 17, 20. And a number of them were from African countries, from the Philippines, from the Caribbean community, England also, and Scotland and Ireland. So quite a diverse group. And what was enriching about it was hearing different understandings of what leadership is. By coincidence, they were all women. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it just happens that way. It was just lovely hearing the differing perspectives that people had, which enriched the whole conversation. One of them is from Zimbabwe, and her take on things was quite a different one from somebody else who had come, I think maybe it was from Angola, Yeah. And I think that's the things we tend to say, African, not realising it is a whole continent with very different cultures and understandings. Middle East, where you're from, being Shiraz and, from Persia. Your worldview could be a very different one, and we need, say, somebody from Israel or Palestine or UAE. And I think we often miss that point, is we go for these broad brushes and don't take the time to understand nuance. And we do that by just pulling those voices out and drawing them out and helping them to be heard. One of the things we do on that program is we do what's called the privilege walk. You only have to Google it, and started out in America, but now, in fact, Warwick University has done it. It's like 25 questions, and there's a whole bunch of things. And what I do is get them standing in a line, and then they walk one step forward or steps back, based on different things. It might be, did your parents go to university? Did you go to university? Do you feel safe walking at night? Did people question? Did you have to keep repeating your name so people could understand it, or did you find a shorthand way of describing, if you like, anglicising what might be a traditional? A whole bunch of stuff, Now, it would come as no surprise that white men tend to be at the front of the queue, but we can't make an assumption about that. For the simple reasons, when I did it, Professor Lindeholt was doing it, I was with somebody else, I was at the back. So we can't make assumptions based on the look of somebody. We can't. It's what is their life, did you live in rental accommodation, the impact of education, poverty, all of these things are things that hold us back. Gender identity, all of that stuff. But what was fascinating on that one last week is you could have predicted she was going to be privileged for a whole bunch of reasons that she had kind of opened up. And she was cross, in a sense, that this is where she ended up. But was equally fascinated another woman who had come from another country. She was also at the front, and she was asking the question, and they were in different spaces by the end, Eddie, I was wondering why I was here. And what we were all kind of thinking is, isn't it fascinating you don't feel you deserve this, and the other one was cross that had been pointed out. And I think when you, in fact, I didn't have to do it. They were doing this themselves as a group, you know. And what was wonderful about this is these are the conversations we need to be having about the messiness of leadership. It's non-linearity. The spaces where people think will be, they may not be. All of those things. That makes for a much richer, personalised leadership journey. Because we need people to think. You can't lead others unless you've had a very good look at yourself as you as a person, as a leader. Because only then can you start to look to lead others. And I think too often training programs are not looking at the individual except in a really superficial way. So I think
totally. I think that level of self-awareness is a big thing that unfortunately sometimes they miss that. And you know what? I mean, leaders, the higher we go in terms of the position, the busier we are getting. And then we even forget to be connected to ourselves.
Yes.
So again, I'm going to talk about Noah Harari a bit, but this historian that he's saying that he's spending up to 1 hour, even sometimes 2 hours per day to focus and do meditation.
Yeah.
And he's saying he's doing this in order to perform better.
Yeah.
So sometimes we are so busy with so many meetings and everything, and we forget about that reflection, that we need to at least have 15 minutes without any disruption, just listening to ourselves and reflecting on things.
Yeah. And there is a fishhook in that, is that it's predicated, you know, Yuval Noah Harari, Israeli historian, done some brilliant books, as we both know, you know, Sapiens, you know, his latest one about AI. But he's wealthy, he's got a great deal of privilege. I'm listening to a book by Hilary Cottam and a new book of hers, and it's about kind of what the future of work is like. And so she goes out to what she called gatherings, and she's been to the States, she's been around different countries, she's been to Barnsley in North Yorkshire, which is ex-mining, has reinvented itself as a distribution hub for the Amazons and all that of the world. And she's in London interviewing people. And there's a couple of things in there, you know, the whole gig economy where people, there's like a 95% turnover rate of Uber drivers within a year. I was just shocked about that one. But there's so much on call all the time, you know, and they have to be. And the thing with poverty is it's sexist. It impacts women more than any other group. It's but it also sucks up bandwidth. You know, planning ahead is hard when you're living in the here and now. And it's very easy to condemn poor people. They don't save, they don't plan, they don't this. They don't have the privilege of those 15 minutes, you know. So it's brilliant. And for those who can, and something I always advocate, book an appointment with yourself during the day. Because you can get consumed dealing with emails and meetings, and there's no space for you, no space to think, no place to plan. There's only you're so busy being a human doing, you're not being a human being. Book time, because you have to make that investment.
Yeah, Brian, you know, sometimes we have that privilege and a lot of support around us to help us to get into that leadership position if we have the goal to get there. Overall, of course, if you have the privilege, perfect.
Yep.
But my question is that how we can delegate some of the tasks that we don't need to do necessarily ourselves, even like giving payment to somebody to help us with some task and doing some cost analysis, that how it can help us to focus more on our aspirations in terms of getting to leadership position, if that's what we want. And at the same time, how we get help seeking and mentorship in order to, you know, not being lonely to get there. Because considering women doing all this multitasking, it could be very overwhelming. And maybe the thing that they need to sacrifice is that leadership thing, that getting into that ladder of success based on what they want to achieve. Maybe a quick example. In our study, we asked this hypothetical question from leaders. We said that imagine you and your partner, you both are in healthcare system, and both of you want to get in that high level leadership position. Which one you think may sacrifice? And everybody said female partner will sacrifice if we are exactly in the same position, and if you want to have children, and if you want to have a life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the penalty, you know, even in very egalitarian societies like you find in Scandinavia, even when people are doing the same job, same hours, same this, same the other, women still carry most of the domestic burden. You know, most of the shopping, even if they're ordering it all in, it's still, that is, so I think everyone was seduced into thinking back in the 80s, if both people are working, that'll create an equal society. Of course, it's just being carried on. There's a penalty of having children. Now most women, so the majority of women have their first child over 30. So obviously that's gone up over time. But that's at a time when most people are starting getting into more senior roles. They take the time off, and there's a financial penalty across lifetime earnings, but also there's a penalty in terms of their perceived ability to cope, perceived ability to, commit to the job, where they think there's an assumption that they will. Nobody asks men, who also are the father, or the parents, I should say, of that child. So we shouldn't make assumptions. I'm going for the heteronormative male-female couple. But, these are the real penalties, and they have real consequences. And then we say, women aren't not this or not that, without actually taking a half a step back and saying, what is actually really going on in people's lives? And what are the things we need to do socially in terms of societal expectation of people stepping up? We have work to do. It might be progressing in the 21st century. We have still some attitudes from the 19th. We have so much work to do still. And we can only start to do it by talking about it, lifting the rocks on it, and then asking the questions, how do we make it better? Asking the question, what you talked about paying someone to do stuff. Absolutely. If you can, are you that privileged? Why? I have somebody comes and cleans, First thing I did when I discovered how much she was asking, and she's paid well above normal rates, and I put it up. Because that is right. If I've got that great blessing, why not do? But what it does means is I can then do other stuff that's adding other value elsewhere. But there again, we need to be mindful. So there was a post that was put out by some CEO who said, everyone should be able to do 60 hours, that shows your commitment type of thing. What they forget is they have a cook, they have a cleaner, they have someone who's taking their car to get it, getting the service. That is not a fair comparison for those people who have all this, and then ask their people to work as hard in the hours that they do when they have actually got a life that is a much more cushioned life. So let's not get seduced by the so-called self-made millionaires and billionaires. Jeff Bezos, he didn't start in a garage, he started with $250,000, supported by his parents to start Amazon. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg's, was it Bill Gates' mother was on the board of IBM? Let's not get too seduced by giving the God heroes to people who've done amazing things without understanding where do they actually come from, because that's not always in the fairy tales that are told.
Brian, let's focus on one of the things that came up out of our study around giving equal opportunities in terms of choices for job. Some workplaces, they are more female dominated, such as nursing. Some workplaces such as mining is more male dominated, or technical job, etc., etc. So there are some arguments that even if we give the exact equal opportunities and choices, again, women, they may choose to go to nursing, males, they may choose to go to mining. What do you think about that? So that's one factor. The other thing is competency. Because, for example, in IT, there is an argument that we want to hire more females to make a balance, female versus males, or having a more balanced social demographic aspect. But then there is a competency thing as well. For example, if you have a male and female, male more competent in terms of their background and qualification, but then we may hire the female in order to enhance the balance in organization, which long term we may have an argument that we focus on gender, balancing gender equality in order to sustain the business in long term, and it will benefit us, that brainstorming aspect, looking at the issues from different background. So what do you think about those factors?
So gosh, there's lots to unravel there. I mean, when it comes to, say, mining and physical graft work, absolutely, if we want to do it, great, we shouldn't stop it. Men tend to do it. We shouldn't stop women from doing it if they can, deal with the physical demands of a job very specific like mining. But we are seeing an awful lot more women in the mines doing a lot of stuff, And when I was flying over, I flew into Brisbane yesterday morning from London, and on the flight I was watching about women in the Second World War. It's a US documentary, and what was fascinating, the men went off to war, but there was all these farming jobs. There was the factory, so Rosie the Riveter, it was a thing. And there was a whole bunch of stuff. Now, they had great allies, like Eleanor Roosevelt was an extraordinary woman championing other women to get in to do those factory jobs and all of those things. There was women whose job was they would fly the planes, say, over to England. So, pilots were a very scarce commodity, so they had to learn the standard had to be the same. And I don't think it's right or fair on anybody to lower a standard. If the technical demands of the job are that, then that should be technically demanded. Flights being a very, very good example of that. What was interesting is at the time, they all had to be volunteers. They didn't have military insurance, military pensions for the women who flew those planes. They died. They didn't get military honours when they were buried. It took until something like, was it 2009 or more recently than that, maybe even 2022, until they were given the Congressional Medal of Honor, the 888 or something like that. They were a postal division. There was a 2-year list of people waiting for post, and post is critical in terms of morale. They cleared that within 3 months. These women, they weren't recognised for what they had achieved. And I think times have definitely gone in the right direction in that respect. London only last year got their first black chief nurse for London, amazingly, called Karen Bonner. And was out for her supper a little while ago, and she was saying that young black women are approaching her and saying, I see you, which means I could be you. And I think we absolutely underestimate the impactfulness of having role models. But those role models will often have done it really, really hard to make the way easier for others. And I think that's what the likes of Karen does, is she makes the path easier. They clear the jungles and the forests to make it easier. And I think we should never underestimate the power of these extraordinary people. But one last point I'll make is this specifically about nursing. My first book I wrote was about nursing education 30 odd years ago now. I was 12. And I did a chapter about men in nursing. I wanted to understand the history of men, and why was it disproportionate number of men were getting to senior education management jobs versus, and the balances got better, but it was way, way unbalanced. But one of the things that struck me that, 30 years on, it's still about the same proportion, about 10% in most countries are men, 11% in England, UK, sorry, but it's still not right. And I was involved in the aftermath of the shootings in Christchurch in 2019. The day after, I was asked would I come, because I have a mental health nursing background as well as, emergency nursing. And we were doing a briefing, and a few minutes in I said, I think we've got a pretty serious problem. And they said, what is it? And I said, I'm the only boy. We've got psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, social workers, and I'm the only man here. And with great respect to all of you incredible women, the conservative men can't really talk to you. And the women really, and we need to respect that. And it was one of those Damascene moments where I realised the reason we need an equal number of men as women in nursing, and medicine has nailed this, by the way, now, which certainly is in the right direction of travel. It's not finished, but is we need to reflect the populations we serve. We need to look them in the eye based on gender, identity, sexuality, all of these things. We need to reflect our populations because our job is to serve the public. And that's why we need it. It's not about status, not about money, not about titles. It is about equity of access to people who can meet their needs.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's all about diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Belonging, absolutely.
From different social demographic background, we are together and we really feel belong, not the tokenism approaches and ticking the boxes on the serve, but we really feel interconnected, working together.
Yeah.
Brian, let's focus on the individual level and how we can improve things. So some of the key findings based on our studies were quite interesting. They were suggesting that at the individual level, women, they need to help each other more. There is some sort of queen bee syndrome happening. Some women, they went through all the challenges, problems, and we understand, it's not easy to get through all those challenges to be successful in what we are doing. But then sometimes when they are there, they may not help enough other women to get there. So having that generosity and mentorship is very important, but there is a queen bee syndrome as well.
Yeah, and I don't know how brave or foolish I would be to kind of make judgments, because I think we've got plenty of examples of men doing the same, I mean, Stalin murdered all the people around him who didn't speak up when they had the chance to do so when he tried to quit in the 1930s, and that's, and Saddam Hussein. These are all historical truths. But what is also true is we need to be making a greater accountability to people who pull the ladder up behind them. Margaret Thatcher famously, first woman Prime Minister of the UK and a whole bunch of things, but famously was never considered any kind of feminist and any kind of supporter of other women. In fact, looked down on women, notoriously so. Infamously described as having more testosterone than the rest of her cabinet, and prided herself in those stereotypical masculinist behaviours, which were the darker underbelly of those behaviours, never the better approaches. But when it comes to leadership, what we also know as a general truth is when you have more diverse executive teams, organisations, that are from the top to the bottom, that you don't have an unbalanced organisation that people can see, that you actually have, if you look in commercial terms, they have more shareholder value, they've got better profits, they're more inclusive because they then keep hold of their staff. I think the public sector generally is better at it, generally speaking, but it also has an awful lot of work still to do. But we should be asking the question, how has somebody got into those positions? Because they didn't start pulling the ladder up when they got up there. They were often people of all genders who were pulling the ladder up all the way, were not supporting us. So when we're asking the question, how did a CEO get there? Well, they didn't start as a CEO, they started here. They may have had leg ups, they may have had connection, they may have had all other things. But why have we not been asking the question, how are you helping others? It is way better to, rather than being a good descendant, it is far better as to be a good ancestor and work to being a good ancestor. Nobody will ever say, by the way, after we die, oh God, they used to do great meetings and their emails were so succinct. They will talk about what kind of person they were, not what job we did.
Totally. So Brian, some of the female leaders also, they suggested there were good numbers of male leaders that actually helped them and supported, which was also interesting. So that queen bee syndrome was there. On the other hand, good numbers of male leaders helped them as well.
And may I, so forgive me, I'd like to think of it as good people who happen to be men, because there's good women and good transgender, anyone. This is about good people. Good people. But I think it's good to see it when more men are supporting those, because they know they have often overcome more to get to, we see it in engineering, a lot of young women now doing engineering. And too often people are saying, I had to be twice as good. I had to work harder because of the expectations that I would fail. And it's like proving them wrong. At least revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's like all of us to help together as human beings, connected, helping each other to grow together. Brian, there was another point, another theme from our study, that women good numbers, they were suggesting that they're not looking that much for high positions. Most of the time they've been approached by others that, you are at that level, please apply for this position, or we want you to be in that leadership position. And then women, they were shocked that, do you think I am at that level? So I mean, I don't know if we call it imposter syndrome or lack of confidence. Those kinds of things, they could be there as well, which may prevent women from getting where they need to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to give you an example of something that's happened to me in the last decade, especially. And what it's about is I've been approached for a bunch of reasons to apply for CEO jobs, a Pro Vice Chancellor job, in more than one jurisdiction to apply for the Chief Nursing Officer jobs. And what I've said to everyone, and it's very flattering, but one, never be flattered into a job. That's a tip that, I think we can all learn, because I've done that. I've gone into jobs because I thought, thank you, and then I'm complete. But what I've said to all the folk who've done this, and I've said the same thing. If I was to get this job, within 3 months, I would have myself on a performance plan, because I would be rubbish at it. And I think it's knowing what you're good at. I would not, my business partner, she is an amazing CEO, and she could be CEO of the world, if she wanted. She would be brilliant at this. I would be truly atrocious. So what it's about, I think, with tapping people on the shoulder is twofold. One, do they have the competence? Are they really able, attitudinally as well as in competence terms? But so often people will hold themselves back because they think, I don't know if I'm good enough. The two psychologists who looked at what we now call imposter syndrome, they didn't call it imposter syndrome. What they observed, I think the studies was in the 70s, what they observed is women tend to doubt themselves more than men. And what we do see from the evidence in nursing and other disciplines is men will have fewer qualifications, less experience, but will often be encouraged to apply for jobs earlier whereas women will get quite the opposite thing. I just need one more qualification. I need another couple of years before I can apply. Now, whether it's misplaced confidence as opposed to competence on the men's part, but this is just a simple fact of truth. So, but the paradox of imposter syndrome, as it's often now called, is that the most successful people are the ones who are most likely to experience it. And I live with it all the time, every day. After this, I'm going off to speak at a keynote at a palliative care conference, and the big one. And all this time, I've been going, what are they thinking? What do they think I would know about this stuff? But here's the lovely bit about it. I treat it now as a friend. And I think it's all in how you shape and frame stuff. If people have faith in you and they believe you can go for a job, go for it. Your job is to live up to their expectations because they know you've got the capability. So I think the very successful people succeed because they are constantly driven to prove that actually they really are good enough. And there's a lovely story. Mike Cannon-Brookes, Australian entrepreneur, co-owner of Atlassian, him and his when they left university, they got a job, and the conditions were that it wouldn't involve wearing a suit, and a few other things like that. They'd have a boss. But he said somehow they became Entrepreneurs of the Year in New South Wales, and then on Young Entrepreneurs of Australia. Complete shock to them, They go to Europe, to the European world, and there's this guy sitting at their table. He was in his 70s, He had thousands of staff. He had a turnover like billions, And he said to them, I don't know what I'm doing here. And this is a guy, there was a real aha moment for Mike Cannon-Brookes, because he says, if somebody like that, with that demonstrable track record of success can feel like this, it's okay to feel like this too. And I think we should frame it as, one, let's not think of it as imposter syndrome, because that pathologizes it. Reframe it as imposter thinking, and you can choose how you think about things, and I choose to think of it as a friend, not an inhibitor.
Thank you so much, Brian. Another point at the individual level was about some of the young women leaders that we interviewed. Some of them, they suggested in their life they pay attention to different dimensions of their life. For example, they like the feminine aspects of themselves. They would like to wear heels, have a sense of fashion and style. At the same time, they are very ambitious, so they had those feminine traits and very ambitious and assertive, like having both traits of masculine and feminine, and they were quite ambitious to get in that high level and fulfill. Having some sort of fulfillment. But then they were saying that they were more criticized because as if they wanted to change the world, as if they are too ambitious, they want too much, those kinds of things. Too early. You want too much too early and you are too ambitious.
Isn't it such a double standard? Nobody would... women who are assertive are called aggressive. Men are just called assertive. Men can get away with it. There's a case that's in this country, I've forgotten the guy's name, and he is on breakfast TV. He wore exactly the same suit and same tie for a year. Nobody noticed, nobody commented. His co-host, she was commented on every single day, occasionally nice stuff, most of it is like, oh, it makes you look bad, it makes you... and this is a real double... And I just take the personal view. Yes, there is a uniform. There's a corporate uniform. We know this sort of stuff, You can't really come to work to dress like a unicorn and hope to succeed if you're kind of in the corporate side. So let's be, But at the same time, we should be celebrating the individuality of people, not be threatened by it. And so often, these are people, young women, who represent a threat to the old order. We have had this story of Florence Nightingale as a lady with the lamp, and people as she passed in the tents in Scutari where she nursed at night with her lamp, and her shadow would touch the beds of these men, and they would. That was all made up by a journalist 200 miles away who wanted to reinforce this, upper middle class woman, and all she did. To the men, she was known as the lady with the hammer. And the reason is, when she got to Scutari, only the officers were given medications for pain and stuff like that. More people died of their wound infection than die of battle, injuries. So she thought, well, that ain't right. That is not right that only one group, the officers, can have, and when these men are literally dying in pain. So she went to the pharmacy with a hammer and broke in. And I often say, and when I'm talking to big groups and small groups, I always say, where would women be? Where would feminism be? Where would women's right be? If for the last 170 years we were celebrating the women with the hammers rather than just the ladies with the lamp. And there's a place for both. But we need to celebrate more women with hammers breaking through on their terms. And one of the things I love about the generation coming through, they've got a lot more hammers, and we need to supply them with them.
Brian, of course, this topic is very interesting, and there are so many factors involved. We need hours to go in depth. So I'm going to finish maybe with one more key point. So we are creating some movements. One of them is Success is Contagious, which is a woman empowering women leadership in healthcare. And Success is Contagious is coming from this gains spiral, or positive gains spiral, that one success can result in more and more success. And this could come from two ways. First, for example, if I get more opportunities in workplace as a woman leader, it will help me to make more and more success out of that. Rather than having lost spirals, we shift that towards gain spirals. And then the other approach is that if I'm connected to very successful women leaders, then their success is contagious to me as well. So my success is contagious to me and others, and their success is contagious to me as well, and I'm learning from those successful leaders as well. So we are connecting leaders to each other, including male leaders from different social demographic backgrounds, in order to help women to become leaders if that their goal in the healthcare settings.
I love that. And you got the Athena program, as you know, and all sorts of things. All of these things are really great. And I've often, bring your daughter to work day, it's quite a common thing now. And one thing I've really loved is when really successful people are providing opportunities through visibility and all of it, it's a great validation, I think, an underestimated validation of their effort, so they can see the generation behind them thinking, I've had to use a pickaxe and we haven't broken through, but when I pass the pickaxe on to you, you might be the one who does, And I think it validates the lonely journey, particularly for women in leadership roles, that actually, and our job is to make it better, as Newton said, I see this far because I stand on the shoulders of giants. When I was awarded an OBE for services to nursing and emergency care in 2019, and when we all went to get our gongs as well, you've got to be there a couple of hours early, and you get talking to some extraordinary women and men, really, really amazing. But one of the things that stuck out from that day, among so many, many things, but one of the things that stuck out was all of us had the same thing to say. We were only there because of love and support of our families and friends, not just, none of us, I went around telling everyone I'd spent over 30 years just waiting to become an overnight success. This is a long haul, but we only did it, and we were more proud that they were proud than we were for ourselves. And that seemed to be a universal theme of the day. The success that you may achieve, whether it's a title or an award success, is actually realising that there's many helped you to get that. And when you see young women being supported and given, and also, by the way, given the chance to say, I don't want that life, that itself is a very empowering thing as well, where people can make a choice to say, this is what I thought I wanted, now I see it, maybe I can do something else, as opposed to going, we should never say to children, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the reason we shouldn't say that is because they get to socialise responses, law, medicine, those things, and then they get narrowed into. When my son was at school, he's in his mid-20s now, there was no app developers. That wasn't a job that existed. There was no drone pilots he was commissioned by Shakespeare's England to do some drone videography, because he's a videographer and filmmaker, of Shakespeare's Warwickshire, the county. That job did not exist when he was at school. So we should say things like, what are you interested in? And let kids, boys or girls, have the most random things that they love, and not say, you should be studying, you should be doing something, instead of doing Dungeons and Dragons, which actually promotes creative imagination, and he and friends still play it. That's what we should be doing, is give people a chance to just flourish.
And be who they want to be.
And they make for the most interesting people. They really do.
Brian, the other day I asked you to give me a few key traits of the successful women leaders that you observed, and you gave a really interesting answer. You put feminine and masculine traits together, and it was really a nice balance. For example, you said those successful women leaders you observed, they had high level of social and emotional intelligence, caring, active listeners, and high level of modesty, but at the same time assertiveness. So it was really interesting answer. That now I want to ask you that when you combine those feminine versus masculine approach, the way that you define those successful women, how you see that, and how male leaders and female leaders, they need to balance those traits.
Yeah, and there's always the bear trap of making assumptions about a male versus female, but actually I think there's also grains of truth in them. We know, for example, women leaders, they tend to be successful because they tend to be more inclusive. They are more collaborative. These are traits which we should be celebrating across
for
the place.
Every leader.
For every leader. Decisiveness is sometimes perceived as a masculine trait, but actually it's a trait for everyone to be celebrating. Yeah. So I think when you look at the most successful leaders, they have this, they're not one-dimensional. Yeah. They draw on a toolbox, a toolkit of different things. Yeah, it's if you see every problem as a nail, the only tool you're ever going to use is a hammer. Yeah. Whereas actually what we need to be doing is these are the most successful ones. Have the social and intellectual and emotional intelligence to determine what works and what doesn't. A good example out of soccer is Alex Ferguson. Now he's dealing with a bunch of multi-millionaire, and some of them are very introvert, some of them are, not, the Wayne Rooneys, David Beckett's. How he managed them was to do this. This is the goal. We're going to win the FA Cup, the League Cup, the Euro Cup. That is the goal. So everyone knew it was connected. And how he dealt with them individually is what motivated them to be the person that fed towards the goal. And the best leaders, they don't treat everyone the same. In the same way, you don't treat your children the same. You work
based on their context.
On the context, what's their style, what's their personality. The successful leaders are the ones who actually manage the individuals in a way that works best for them, while being really clear on the eyes on the prize. And that's, I think, a lesson for everyone.
Great, Brian. Thank you so much. Let's finish with the definition of feminism. Sometimes people, they ask me that, are you a feminist? And I would say my definition of feminism is inclusion, diversity, belonging, human right, providing equal choices, opportunities, and equitable access to services based on the context. So I put it that way. And yes, I'm a feminist. Yeah.
And I'll go, what she said. that would be how I'd interpret it as well. Okay. And it's a fascinating one because there's now a bit of a pushback among young women to say, I'm not a feminist. But, we've got to where we've got to because of the work of others. Was it right for time? Yes. Would it be right for now? Not necessarily, because things evolve, thinking changes, and we need to be mindful of not always judging people for what we would do now. And that means that it's always evolving, always reshaping. Just as philosophy isn't fixed, I'm fascinated by philosophy, and language is not fixed, it evolves. But it is about all those things. Human rights, social justice, enabling people to flourish.
It's so great to have you, Brian, one of the most impactful leaders, recognized and voted in UK in National Health Services. It's amazing to have you, and I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you so much, Jane. And the generosity, both your spirit, the intensity of your listening, the questions, driving these sometimes, inarticulate speeches of the heart and these soliloquies on speed. But thank you for being an extraordinary interviewer.
I appreciate that. We will continue these great talks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.